I mean, because to you it seems so clear. And then the person says, well, actually, I think I met you at this other place. And so your mind kind of goes, and realigns itself. And you go, oh, yeah, that's right. I remember now how that happened. So a lot of what we think of as memories are just fantasies. They make sense to us because we're the ones that are believing it. But really, they are not real. It's just a mental movie that we buy into. So this is what memory is. And on the flip side of it, looking toward the future, we have these words like goal, ambition, purpose, intention, And what is that? Well, they are memories, in a sense, of the future, right? It's the same part of our brain, the same part of our mind at work, but it's in a different area of time called the future. So what we can do with this new model that I'm talking about, once we, realize that thinking is a connection, when our mind is in the past, or part of our mind is in the past, and it's connected to us because this inner part of our awareness is always connected to us. We have two parts to our awareness. We have our outer awareness. So, for example, right now I'm looking at the furniture in my room with my physical senses. But with my inner senses, I can remember last week, last month, last year, or I can anticipate tomorrow. That's with my inner senses. So both my inner senses and my outer senses are working simultaneously. And that connection between the present, which is where I am right now, and the past or the future, that's what we call thinking. So when we are thinking of the past, we call it remembering, or perhaps regretting. If we think about a past that didn't happen and we feel sorry that it didn't happen, we call that regret, perhaps, right? So we can imagine things that didn't take place the same as we can imagine things that did take place. So if we're thinking of something that we call memory, what that means to us is that we think that we're remembering something in the past accurately. And the same thing is true in the future. So if I, for example, decide after we finish our conversation here that I'm going to walk to the corner store and buy a loaf of bread, that's just an image in my mind, right?
Yeah.
But if I decide to do it, then it becomes a goal. I can go outside, I can walk to the corner store, buy a loaf of bread, come back. Suddenly that vision, that dream, that goal, that intention that I had is now physical reality. That bread is a part of my physical life. So that's what goal setting is. And what I've found in my research over the past 25 to 30 years is that the key to using your mind to creating the life that you want is to, number one, decide what you want. In other words, to get really clear about the goals that you want to create for yourself. And the sad part is that only about 3% of the population does that.
Yeah, that is so true.
In other words, 95% of the population, roughly, doesn't really have any goals. They sort of take life as it comes. They don't believe they have any power, and they just sort of, they're like a straw blowing in the wind. It blows them one way, and they go that way. It blows them another way, and they go the other way.
Yeah.
But if we have an intention, if we have a goal, then whatever happens in our life, we can use it to help us figure out a solution to the problems that we have, and we can actually get closer and closer to the goals that we want to achieve and create more and more of what we want in our lives.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's the state of the economy for the last, 10 years or so. But, a lot of people just take each day as it comes with not even looking at the future or even preparing for the future, both financially or emotionally or, with their mind, and that part right there is scary.
Well, it is, for whatever reason, I guess because, like I say, we don't have a mental model of it, right? We don't have a philosophy that says my mind is the creative force in my life, and I can come up with ideas and fantasies, and I can find a way to make it real. But certain people do. Steve Jobs did. Elon Musk, look at this guy. He's creating electric cars. He's flying rockets to to Mars. He just put his one of his automobiles into an orbit around the sun, right? So, I mean, really pretty amazing. So, of course, there's people like this that have this ability or have this power to sort of change things in a big way for all of us. But individually, as I was talking about, Phil Mickelson or Tiger Woods or Michael Jordan, they can create their own goals in their lives. And of course, each of us can do the same thing. So what I tell people is if you can walk to the corner store and buy a loaf of bread, you can achieve all your goals. If you just knew the details and the intricacies of what was involved internally in coming up with that idea, coming up with a plan, forming the intention, and then step by step following through, you can achieve your goals.
Yeah, that is so true. Just like going back a little bit, like with me, I'm retired. I'm very close to your age. I started my life out in broadcasting after the military. My parents said, hey, you need a trade. So I went to broadcast training. I worked as a DJ and then did some talk shows. And then I married the wrong woman and got out of radio because radio, I hate to say it, especially back in the 70s and 80s. I mean, you never knew from week to week if you had a job.
Right.
So I went on, professionally running businesses and doing things like that. So, I've been retired for like a year and a half, and then I got really sick about 6 months ago. I mean, really sick. I got bone cancer.
Wow.
And I was laying in bed, and I thought I was going to die. That's how sick I was. And all of a sudden, I had this like dream, just like what you talking about. You were looking at yourself from, looking down at yourself. I had pretty much the same thing, I was looking at myself, and it all of a sudden it said, hey, Gary, do what you love to do. You love to talk, do a talk show. Boom.
Right.
The next day I started feeling a little bit better, and then all of a sudden I go up to my wife and I said, I started out at 10 years old in CB. At 12 years old, I had an amateur license, did broadcasting. You know what I want to do? Besides ride my Harley motorcycle, I want to do a talk show. And that's how this was born, And I remember the first week I was on, I had like 3 or 4 people listening. Now I have thousands of people listening, and it's gone crazy, and I enjoy it.
Yeah. So in my terminology, I would say that you have created your dream.
I think so. Yes. This is, and I've never been more happier in my 66 years as I have been in the last 5 months.
I'll tell you, this dream that I had when I was a kid, I mean, even though there are times when it beat me up, literally, I mean, it was either a dream or it was a nightmare. I mean, sometimes it was both, because for a long time I tried to achieve some of these goals, and it didn't seem like it was ever going to happen. But it has given me a huge gift in that ever since I was 10 years old, I've had this focus, to first of all figure out what happened. How is it possible to get information from the future? How does the mind work? What is memory anyway? What is thought? That took me 25 or 30 years to figure that out.
Well, can you tell me a little? Can you tell me? Because, another thing, okay, have you ever gone into a situation where you walk in there and all of a sudden everything that transpires is just like, it's almost like a dream. It's like you experience that same experience before, or you knew it was going to happen. I mean, right down from the beginning of the conversation, what transpired, what happened. Have you ever had that?
Oh, yeah, it happens a lot. Sometimes in a big way and sometimes in a small way, I mean, what you're doing right now, from what you just told me, is exactly what you dreamed about doing, which was essentially having your own radio show, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean...
So what you're doing right now is literally what you manifested from this vision. But I'll tell you, I'll tell you something else. One of the things I saw in this dream, this original vision, right, was that I was going to be a university professor and I was going to marry an Oriental woman. Well, what is that? I mean, how does that work? How does that fit in? That was totally outside my experience, right? But I was pretty smart. When I was in school, I was pretty smart. So it made sense to me that I would do well in school. I would go on into university and then study, whatever I wanted to study in school, get a PhD, become a professor, and that would be one way that I could fulfill this fantasy or this dream,
Uh-huh.
Well, it didn't happen that way. I mean, by the time I got to my last year in high school, I was so fed up with the whole system. I became just so disenchanted with the school system and with my parents and with the society and with the culture that I was in. I literally failed out of high school, couldn't go to university. And that was such a bummer for me because it made me so depressed because I thought I'm never going to be able to manifest this dream. And so from the time I was about, 18, when I finished high school, I traveled around doing all these menial construction jobs and things. It took me until I was about 40, actually 39 years old, when I was talking to somebody and they said, well, if you want to go to university, you can go to university now. And I'd always thought it was impossible for me to go to university because I failed out of high school, right? But they said, no, you can go as a mature student. You're 39 years old. You can just apply and they'll accept you. Well, that blew my mind. So I enrolled in university when I was 39. And I loved it. I was right in the middle of writing my book, Mind, Time, and Power, about how the mind works, past, present, and future, and all thinking is time travel and that sort of thing. And what I found with that book was that I didn't have the education, I didn't have the vocabulary to be able to explain it. So when I was able to go to university, I studied psychology, philosophy, linguistics, I studied physics, and in the process, I put together the first draft of this book. And my plan was do a master's degree, do a PhD, become a university professor. I can manifest this dream, And what happened as I got into my master's degree, just starting my master's program, I was in a really horrific traffic accident. And I was in hospital for a while. I was in so much pain, I had to drop out of school. And again, in my early 40s, my mid-40s, totally depressed again. There goes that dream again. It's never going to happen, right? But while I was in university studying linguistics, I picked up a diploma so that I could teach English because I have a real knack for languages. I speak a few languages. And so I thought that would be a fun thing to do, would be to teach English. So when I got better, it took a few years to get better, but when my body healed and I started looking for work, I started teaching English. And I worked in a few colleges in the Vancouver area where I was living at the time. And that brought me to a place called Capilano College, which is in North Vancouver in BC. And they said to me one day, do you want to go to China? We have this program in China, and we're looking for some people over there to teach business English. Do you want to go to China? So I said, well, sure, why not? I had no thoughts about going to China.
Anthony, what year was that roughly?
This was in 2000. Well, let's see. I started teaching English in about 1998, and it was in 2005 that the college I was working in went out of business. So I got hired by Capilano College to teach in their Chinese program. This was 2005. So I went to China in 2005.
Oh, wow.
And it was great. I loved it, because I'd studied anthropology. I have a real knack for languages, and I love different cultures. So I was teaching in this program, and I was on the college faculty. And I can remember clearly. I mean, I had given up all thoughts, the past 15 years of getting a master's, doing a PhD, becoming a professor. I'd given all that stuff up, and here I was living in China, teaching English.